Well, kia ora koutou, good afternoon everyone, and I trust you all had good weekends. I just wanted to start by acknowledging the incredible news we received over the weekend that New Zealand pilot Philip Mehrtens has been released by Papua rebels in Indonesia after being held hostage for 592 days. I just do want to thank the many people who have worked tirelessly on this mission since the very beginning. These men and women in New Zealand's public service are expected to bring professionalism and excellence to their work every day. But cases like Philip's demand a deeply personal commitment and emotional investment in doing what it takes to secure the right outcome for Philip and doing what they can to care for his family along the way. And I hope that they do take a great deal of satisfaction in the outcome for Philip and his family. I also do want to acknowledge Foreign Minister Winston Peters for his leadership. He has helped lead an unstinting effort by his MFAT officials and others where the welfare of Philip Mehrtens was paramount, and he personally met with the Mehrtens family earlier this year as well. Minister Peters, as you know, is now heading to New York for the UN General Assembly, where he will be representing New Zealand. But it wasn't just the good people at MFAT and other agencies, there were many other people involved. In Papua there were the churches, local politicians and civil society representatives who all worked relentlessly on this case. And I note that Philip's family have also placed on record their appreciation to the hostage takers for keeping Philip safe throughout this long saga. I would also like to thank the New Zealand media who understood the sensitivity and also the high stakes of the situation over the past 19 months and reported on Philip's plight, I think, in a very responsible and a restrained manner, and thank you for that. And after several conversations with Indonesian President Widodo and then many more generally across the Indonesian system, I've now written to President Widodo to express New Zealand's gratitude for the approach that his government took working with us. This was a complex situation that required extraordinary sensitivity, and we're very proud of everyone who contributed to Philip's release and freedom. Now, changing gears, since we first came into office, I've been clear that our government is utterly focused on three things: rebuilding the economy, restoring law and order, and delivering better health and education. And on each of those fronts, we're starting to make some progress, real progress. Fiscal discipline is kicking in, inflation is coming down, and now interest rates are starting to fall. We have more cops on the beat fighting crime, with serious assaults coming down 22% in Auckland CBD, and we have more changes coming to keep up the fight, with fresh powers to take on gangs passed into law just last week. And we're also making big changes to fix education and health, new curriculums, new tools for teachers like structured literacy, a commissioner appointed to Health New Zealand to drive the performance that Kiwis expect. It's a big program of work, and while we have a lot more to do, we're seeing some early encouraging signs of progress. And that is in part thanks to some incredible public servants working day and night to deliver on the government's ambitious program to get New Zealand back on track. We're only able to deliver on those big legislative and operational changes thanks to their commitment and their efforts, and I'm personally very grateful for it. I do expect the public service to be both highly productive and collaborative, with efficient communication, free-flowing ideas and innovation, and close professional relationships within teams and across agencies. And I do not want to see working from home undermining that ambition that we have. What was introduced as a temporary measure during COVID 4 years ago risks putting pressure on team performance, office culture and talent development. Young people entering the public service as talented graduates also deserve the opportunity of watching, responding, learning and developing into the next generation of public service leaders. But achieving those outcomes from your laptop at home without the gift of regular feedback and the chance to see high performance in action is much harder. In short, ill-managed work from home not only threatens public sector performance today, it also puts the quality of our future leadership at risk. And for many of these reasons, a number of governments and businesses all around the world are changing their own settings and policies around work from home. 4 years on from the pandemic, 4 years on, the New Zealand government now needs to head in the same direction to better enhance productivity, collaboration and connectedness. So for some more detail on the way forward, I'll hand over to the Minister for Public Service, Nicola Willis.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As you say, in recent years, particularly following the COVID-19 pandemic, more people are working from home for some of their working week. And if people are self-employed or running their own business, it's their choice. While for employees, working from home happens with the agreement of employers. Many people will tell you that carefully defined working from home arrangements can benefit workers and employers alike. Many will also tell you that if the pendulum swings too far in favour of work from home, there can be major downsides for both employers and employees. And that's even before we consider the effects for CBD retailers, restaurants and cafes. Zoom and Microsoft Teams have significant limitations. And while some swear by the benefits of working from their kitchen table, others admit that routinely leaving the house for work increases their motivation, focus and productivity. There are good reasons why office workers have traditionally been physically brought together for work. It allows for face-to-face conversation, the sharing of skills and experience, and relationship building. It supports younger and newer employees to observe, learn from and form connections with their more experienced colleagues. It ensures managers can monitor team dynamics, including whether people are disengaged, struggling, or at odds with their colleagues. And in recognition of these realities, many employers have deliberately tightened up their working from home arrangements. Some have as good as banned working from home. Some have mandated minimum days when workers must be present in the office. And others have significantly restricted the use of working from home for particular types of employees, such as graduates and team leaders. The overall theme is that good employers are taking active steps to ensure their working from home policies are fit for purpose. It is time the government did the same thing. We are a major employer, and the work public servants do is of critical importance to all New Zealanders. Right now, it's hard to say how prevalent working from home arrangements really are in the public service because data is not centrally collected. Even so, we know that many public servants regularly choose to work from home. Here in Wellington, you only have to walk down Lambton Quay on a Monday or Friday, observe the fluctuation in the number of people swiping into offices each day, or talk to a cafe owner to see the impact. And I have had more than one public servant privately raise with me their worry about the damage widespread working from home arrangements has had on their workplace culture and the performance of their team. The workforce policy statement that the government published earlier this year makes clear our expectation that workplace productivity in government agencies must be actively monitored, regardless of an employee's work location. Even so, I remain concerned that public agencies have inconsistent approaches to working from home arrangements, people's individual agreements can be ill-defined, there is very little central oversight of what agreements exist, and there is therefore very little ability to compare the impact different agency approaches might be having on public service delivery and performance. So today I am announcing new government expectations for the use of working from home arrangements in public sector agencies. I have asked the Public Service Commissioner to immediately communicate these expectations to chief executives and to review the existing guidance to agencies. Before I outline the new expectations, I want to make explicit that chief executives must continue to uphold their legal and contractual obligations. In particular, New Zealand employees have a legal right to request a flexible working arrangement and to have that accommodated, unless their employer can show one of several legal grounds for refusal. The government's expectations are, number one, working from home arrangements in the public service are not an entitlement and must be by explicit agreement between an employee and their employer. Chief executives and managers must ensure that where any agreements are made, they are subject to consistent monitoring and oversight. Number two, working from home arrangements should only be agreed to where they will not compromise the performance of employees, their teams, or their agencies. This requires agencies to adequately weigh the benefits of employees being physically present for work, the cumulative impact of widespread working from home arrangements, and to consider performance in its widest sense, including potential impacts on learning and development, productivity, team culture and engagement. Number three, agencies must actively monitor the prevalence and impact of working from home agreements and be able to regularly report to the Public Service Commission about the number and nature of the agreements they have in place, including having a clear understanding of the impact these agreements will have on particular days of the week. Where possible, our government wants to see more public servants coming into their place of work each day, and our expectations reflect that desire. Agreement, not entitlement, performance first, active monitoring. I've asked the Public Service Commission to support agencies to implement these new expectations, including ensuring information about working from home arrangements is captured in a way that allows for easy comparison between agencies. My goal is that by early next year, we will be able to make this information publicly available in a user-friendly way so that people can look at what's really going on with working from home arrangements. Before I hand back to the Prime Minister, let me say I know there are many sensible reasons why public servants work from home. Lots of men and women have in place good faith arrangements that work well not only for them and their family, but for their agency as well. The new expectations I've just announced will not prevent that from happening. But for the public servants listening, I'd just say this. Choosing not to come to your physical place of work does have an impact on your team and your wider community. If it's possible for you to work in the office, you should. Back to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Nicola. Look, before we get into any questions on this in general in nature, I'll just quickly run through the week in the House. This week in the House, our efforts on law and order continue to march on with the third reading of the Corrections Amendment Bill and the first reading of the Sentencing Bill. We'll also pass legislation that will enable the re-establishment of charter schools. And with that, we're happy to take your questions.
Evidence hasn't been collected to date.
Sorry,
Given that there hasn't been data collected to date, what evidence do you have that this actually is the problem driving Wellington's woes, as opposed to, say, your public sector job cuts?
Well, I wouldn't say we are saying that. We're saying very clearly here that with respect to the public sector, we're wanting to make sure that it's not just an entitlement to work from home, it's by agreement, and that's the key thing that we're trying to underscore here. There's a range of research from around the world. I haven't seen specific New Zealand-based research on productivity in the workplace, but you've seen a number of governments and also large companies, global companies, determine that for culture, for building culture, for the development of the talent, for communication, collaboration, productivity reasons, they do want their employees back at work in the office. And all we're saying here is, look, we support flexible working arrangements, but actually it's got to be through agreement, not just through entitlement.
And what evidence do you have that it is causing a problem here in New Zealand, in our public sector at the moment, in terms of performance?
Well, again, we see that across a number of organisations. We'd look at, we want our public service really focused on delivering our targets and our outcomes. And as we've seen in the last few years, they've gone backwards. We want to make sure that everybody here is working really hard, innovating, getting super creative about how we actually solve some of the problems that we've got, and we think we can do that better by having more of the staff back in the physical environment.
Why not wait until you actually have this data to see if there's an issue before setting up these expectations?
Again, we want to make sure that we get on with this and set an expectation that it's not an entitlement, it is actually through agreement. And then we've got active monitoring, as Nicola outlined, to work through, and we're also making sure that we don't want any compromise of performance of the public service whatsoever by virtue of working from home.
To actually point to any evidence that there's an issue in New Zealand based on people working from home?
I just say to you, large organisations, 4 years after COVID, have been looking at productivity of their organisations, how they improve culture, how they improve performance, working together. We've got, I've seen research studies that have said that actually people working from home get less career counselling, less talent development investment. That's not good for their careers ultimately. So look, we're just saying, look, we want people back in the office. That's what the starting point should be. And of course, we can facilitate, by agreement, other flexible working relationships.
Will there be a minimum?
Sorry.
Minister, you've said that there's not a centralised way of reporting the data, but have you had any, singular data from any agency that would give a kind of picture into what's happening across the public service overall? Yeah,
look, the most comprehensive snapshot that the Public Service Commission can provide me is from a 2021 survey, which showed around 58% of participants made use of working from home arrangements. Of note, only 65% of public servants actually took part in that survey. I've also surveyed the agencies that I work directly with, the Public Service Commission, Commission, for example, advises that 66% of their employees have working from home arrangements, with about a third working from home 1 day a week and another third working from home 2 days a week. So only a third of their employees are in the office 5 days a week. The Social Investment Agency says that on average across the week more than 4 out of 5 are working in the office. And Treasury says it does not centrally keep information that allows it to confirm any overall trends in working from home, but estimates that the staff working in a given week, approximately 2/3 are working from the office. So even, that data that I've given you, the different ways it's being communicated and described, I think that's a problem. We should have a common way of describing this so that I can compare one agency with another and say, well, actually, that agency seems to have a lot more working from home going on than that one. Is that working? What can we observe about that? Does that need to change?
Joe? Sorry, just go, Joe.
A couple of things there. One, what are you going to do about those agencies that don't have the office space for their staff to be there? Because many have cut back as a result of COVID, have hot desking, and they've done that deliberately because of the number coming in. So how are you going to address that?
Well, I have confidence that there is excess office capacity across the government footprint, and I have had more than one minister come to me to share their experience of going for a floor walk in their agency and observing a lot of empty desks.
So you'd be quite comfortable for agencies to basically pull together and have different agencies working in different offices depending on whether desk space is available? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I just think you're leaping to that. Let's, in the first instance, use the space that we currently have. What I'm saying to you is that I think right now we're not using all the office space we have already. There are agencies who have many empty desks on any day of the week.
Can I also just ask too, there's been a number of businesses over recent months that have been asked about what it is that is impacting them in terms of not being able to stay open or it's closing for several days, etc. And the three that commonly come up are Wellington City Council issues around parking and cycleways, etc., public servant job losses, and then working from home. So the working from home element, how much do you think that is actually contributing overall to the impact on businesses?
I think it is an element, and I think this is a byproduct of us actually calling the public service back to the office. Again, supporting flexible working where it makes sense, but I think that will be actually a benefit to Wellington CBD for sure.
Do you think it's the most significant? I mean, can you
well,
I
think you identified there's a range of factors that are contributing to challenges within Wellington CBD, and you hit on them there. I'm just saying it is certainly a significant component.
What exactly is it?
Sorry, Jason.
What exactly is it that you're implying that these civil servants are doing when they're working from home? Are you implying that they're just mucking about, skiving off? I mean, what's the underlying tone that you're trying to strike here?
The underlying tone is that performance matters, and actually doing your job is the most important thing, and then your arrangements come secondary to that.
So are they not people that say they're working from home are not working from home? Is that?
Oh, many are working incredibly hard. Many are very productive and are doing a great job. But as I say, I've had more than one public servant raise with me their concerns about the performance culture in their own team, among their own colleagues. I've had people reflect to me that they're not satisfied that their team is being properly monitored, that they're getting the same levels of interaction that they should. I worry for those young grads. I learnt a lot of my career by being in the kitchen, getting a cup of tea and seeing my senior colleague and saying, hey, how does the document management system work? How do we do this? How do we do that? You can't do it over Zoom. That's an entirely different thing. And young people and new workers can only learn from their senior colleagues if they're physically present.
I think that's the real opportunity lost, to be honest, Jason, which is that actually the dynamic you get to build when you've got teams physically together, working together, the informal flow of information that happens, the ideation that takes place, the development, the feedback conversations that actually help develop those individuals. You can maintain some of that culture while you're actually working from home with a mix of working from home, but actually it gets really difficult, and that's why I think you're seeing many global organisations and also governments actually saying, look, 4 years on from COVID, we've sort of been able to sort of maintain or drift down our culture, but actually we want to enhance it, we need to grow it and develop it even further, and that's actually the benefit of having people in the office.
How many days a week do you expect public sector workers to be in the office?
Look, that will vary from individual to individual. I'm really reluctant to say this is the minimum days a week, because that could set out an expectation that you're entitled to a day from home or a half day from home or 2 days from home. Our starting position is that actually your working from home agreement needs to be consistent with your ability to perform your role, your team's ability to perform, and your agency's ability to perform. The simple fact is, in some circumstances, you won't be able to work from home at all.
We go to Jenna.
Is it too prevalent, the Mondays and Fridays off? Is it too convenient that a lot of people in Wellington are taking Mondays and Fridays off?
Look, this is why I want the data, Jenna, because that's what a lot of cafe owners say to me, that's what a lot of small business owners say to me, and I say to them, look, I can't prove that's the case right now. That's why I want the data, so we can see what's really going on.
And one of the groups that have probably really benefited from working from home situations have been young families with kids. Do you recognise that by doing this, that might disadvantage young mothers from coming back into the workforce as soon because they won't have that flexibility?
No, because I think that those arrangements will still be able to be struck, and I also think it's appropriate that those arrangements are properly supported and monitored, as is our legal requirement actually. And I just also point out, it's not just mums who do caregiving, it's dads too. So let's be really careful with our expectation that it's not just women who should be having flexible working arrangements, it's men too.
Mikey, we go to Mikey. Sorry guys, I'll come to Mikey and then Thomas.
Will it apply across the country?
Sorry.
Will it apply across the country? And also, what about Crown entities?
No, Crown entities will not be bound by the guidance but they may take note of it. They have that option. But yes, it will apply across the country. Obviously, we have public servants across the regions and across our towns.
And in terms of managers, do they not already have the power, if they're seeing that their team isn't productive enough, or that an individual isn't probably working to their best ability, don't they already have the power to tweak those arrangements and pull them back into the office? Why does it need the government to kind of make this statement?
Yes, they do, but that doesn't mean they all are. And the point of our statement today is to make it very clear what our expectation is. We want every manager to know exactly what the arrangements are, to be monitoring those arrangements and be able to look their chief executive in the eye and say, performance in my team is not being compromised. I don't honestly think every manager in the public service could say that today. I think many arrangements are very casual, are not well understood by colleagues or other teams, and I think it's time we tightened that up.
Okay, Thomas.
Do you keep the data on attendance for ministerial officers? And
Sorry?
So do you keep data on attendance for ministerial officers? And if so, what does it say?
Well, again, I mean, the nature of our work is that most of our team and our staff are here in this place, working with us together for the very reason that we find it very difficult actually having lots of people working from home. It doesn't kind of work for us. So I'm less hung up on that, but certainly our expectation of the agencies that Nicola and I have responsibilities for is that they'll be doing that.
So there's no data on ministerial officers, but there will be under this rule? Would this rule apply to officers in the Beehive? Ministerial
services are part of the Department of Internal Affairs, so their chief executive will be required to keep records, yes. Obviously, the Department of Internal Affairs is the employer rather than ministers themselves. That's an important distinction. That means that it is the agency and the chief executive that set those expectations. But what I would say, anyone who works in this building will know, the people in this building work extremely hard. Our staff and ministerial services are very physically present. There will be working from home arrangements that exist that are carefully managed.
Okay, sorry, we go to Ben.
Prime Minister, just on a different issue, interested in New Zealand's shift on Israel at the United Nations last week.
Sorry, our vote?
Yes, that's right. And follow-up interviews from Winston Peters. Obviously, New Zealand voted in favour of that resolution back in Palestine. Australia and Canada, which had previously been in lockstep with, did not. They abstained. Foreign Minister Winston Peters also said he believed that, quote, we should do what New Zealanders would want us to do, and also that Israel had, quote, gone too far in the pursuit of Israel's defence. So is the coalition in lockstep on that position?
Yes, we are. We have an independent foreign policy, and so New Zealand makes its own decisions, as I've said to you many times before, that are in our national interest and our security and economic interests. And again, what we're arguing for is we want all parties and all sides to exercise maximum restraint in the region and de-escalate. We've seen huge challenges in recent days and recent weeks, and a real risk of actually contagion throughout the region, and that's why we supported that recommendation at the UN.
Mr. Peters' point.
Sorry.
Mr. Peters' point was that Israel had acted disproportionately in its defence. Do you share that view?
Yes.
You haven't criticised Israel to that extent, for the entirety.
I would just ask you to go back and look at the way that we've taken our positions through the course of this conflict over the last almost 12 months, and I think we've handled this in a very reasonable way, in a very considered way, and I think in a very thoughtful way. And I'm proud of our position, but equally we will act in our own interest. And that's exactly what we did. Sorry. Can we carry on with the working from home questions, and we'll come back to the others?
Yes, but I've got one of those. So, Minister, with all the empty offices, how much money are we actually losing by not filling these office spaces, given that there is the lease and the rentals, they carry on, and we've got empty buildings?
Well, obviously, agencies have a range of different lease arrangements, and I know that agencies are working to ensure that when their leases are coming up, they're making sure that the new footprint they sign up to better matches the workforce that they expect to have over the next few years. But we do also have office spaces that aren't filled. I know that for a fact from the Government Property Group, and I imagine that this varies considerably from agency to agency. One of the reasons I want to be clearer about these expectations is that I actually want government departments to plan a bit better, to say, well, actually, how many desks do we really need? How many people are really coming into work? Are we comfortable with that number of people being working from home on a given day? I'm really interested to see the pattern over the working week. What are the days that people are working from home, and what does that mean for office capacity?
But that's a significant amount of money that's being spent on leases and rents, and having nobody in there. I mean, that would be a significant cost to the government, isn't it?
Well, look, I wouldn't say nobody. That's not the case. As I say, some of these lease arrangements were signed up under the last government. It's our ongoing expectation that government departments ensure value for money and are always looking for opportunities to deliver things more efficiently. That includes their leases.
Sorry, we'll go to Tova.
Thank you, Minister. Has the Ministerial Advisory Group provided any options to replace the IREX project yet?
Yes, and Cabinet is considering those.
Has there been? When did they provide that advice?
Some time ago.
Right, and so is there some kind of conflict within Cabinet about agreeing on those options, or what's taken so long?
We're giving those recommendations proper advice, proper consideration. We're taking a range of advice from our own officials.
And what's the hold-up?
We're making sure we get this right. The last government didn't.
Can we get a sense as to the timing when we might get a decision?
Yes, you'll hear a decision this year.
Okay, and so when did that advice, the Ministerial Advisory, say some time ago? Was it weeks,
I can come back to you.
months?
I can come back to you with that.
A few months ago.
Prime Minister,
just clarify that this policy is about productivity and performance in the public sector. It's not about saving Wellington cafes. Is that correct?
Correct. Our primary reason for doing it is to make sure that we've got a really high-functioning, ambitious public service that's actually building a cadre of talent within it. We think that is better achieved by people being in the office environment as a first port of call. Of course, as I said, by agreement, there'll be arrangements around flexible working and family extenuating circumstances, all that good stuff. But the reality is, we want to see more productivity out of the public service. We want to see more talent development. We want to see more communication, more ideation, more innovation, more creativity about how we solve some of the big challenges that we've got in front of us. And that's the reason for bringing people together. And I don't think that's what you're seeing around the world, right, as well. It's not just us talking about this today. It's actually been a topic for big, large multinationals who are wrestling with the same challenges, other governments as well. And as I said, for a period, it's been 4 years since COVID. These were measures that were put in place, as temporary measures through the COVID period. And it's difficult to sustain a culture when a large proportion, a third of your workforce, may or may not be actually in the office environment. And so that's why we're saying, look, we want it to be start there. It's not an entitlement. It is actually about an agreement that you can make. But actually, we want to improve the performance of the public service, and we think this is a part of it.
Prime Minister, can I get it more often?
Sorry?
Do you think politicians should be here at Parliament more often, and those MPs who are just list-based, who don't have electorates, Should they be at Parliament in particular?
Well, I just say to you, if you think that the only responsibility of a politician is to be in Wellington, that's a problem. That's a beltway view of the world. I just say to you, we've got a big responsibility out there to make sure we're serving our constituents and our electorates. We've got responsibility to engage with stakeholders, to make sure we're developing and building policy. We've got to make sure that we obviously are doing our job as parliamentarians here in Parliament. And obviously, most importantly, we've obviously got commitments around our people out there in the regions as well. So, and getting out and about. So, I consider myself working 7 days a week. That's why I get up at 4:30 every morning, 7 days a week to go to work. And that requires me to work here in Wellington, requires me to work in Auckland, requires me to work all around the country.
Prime Minister, can I get a clarification just on what you were talking about at your Bloomberg address on Friday in the Q&A session? You were talking about a referendum on a 4-year term. Is that something that we're going to see in the next election? New Zealanders will go to the polls to vote on a government as well as this idea of a 4-year term, but just a change in the electoral environment? Yeah, look, as you know, we've got coalition agreements with both National Act, National New Zealand First. All three parties in the government actually support or have interest in a 4-year term being explored. We haven't started that work. As you know, we're being really disciplined about working through these quarterly action plans, and that's what we're focusing the government and our cabinet meetings around is driving towards those actions. So, look, it is on our agenda. It's just not something that we've discussed at this point in time. It would be too premature, frankly, to say whether we're taking that out to the next election or not. But regardless, that will be a referendum decision, no doubt about it. Can I also just ask the pair of you, if you can, that will spending $3 billion a year fix child poverty in terms of getting the measures down to the 6% level that Jacinda Ardern wanted in the long-term 2028 target for material hardship?
Well, I'll just say to you, the last government increased government spending by 84% and outcomes went backwards. If you think about the last year of the Labor government, I think there was 23,000 kids more that were actually put into poverty. And so when we came to government, what we saw was a target that clearly was off track and not going to be delivered. What you've seen from us is actually financial discipline and good economic management. You saw in the budget, your Treasury saying, I think we're going to lift 17,000 kids out of poverty by virtue of our budget decisions. Think about tax relief, think about family boost, think about all of those sorts of things. So, the bottom line is it's not just about spending money, it's actually about good economic management will make the biggest difference, and that's why we're so focused on the economy. Sorry, Jen, I didn't finish
Israel before.
Sorry?
Just to conclude that line of question on Israel before. Just why now? Why has the shift come from New Zealand's position now? Why are you comfortable criticising Israel now when 11 months, 41,000 civilian deaths, 16,000 children deaths?
Well, I reject the way you're asking the question, to be honest, Ben. I just said to you, I'd ask you to go back and look at each stage over the course of the last 12 months when events have transpired, what our position, our statements have been. Whether it's been, I disagree. I disagree with that completely. Whether it's been actually the three, the Cairns announcements that we've coordinated with Australia and Canada, whether it's been statements about calling for a ceasefire, and we had a series of UN votes. We've had other UN votes about recognising Palestine and other things.
Right, this week is a shift.
Well, the situation is shifting. I mean, it's not the same situation it was 12 months ago, and so our position is I think, a very clear-minded and a very sensible one. And I'm actually proud of the positions that we've taken over the course of the last 12 months. So I just say to you, that's go back and look at what we've done and what we've said in each stage along this, and the setting and the context that we were in. But what we're seeing in the Middle East is a real risk of real rapid contagion.
Just on that topic, what's your view of the Israeli pager attack on Hezbollah? It's been criticised as terrorism by some, including the former CIA director Leon Panetta.
Oh, look, I don't have a view on that. What I'd say to you is what we want to see is massive de-escalation. It's incredibly concerning when you've even just watched the events over the last 24 hours again, and the risk of widening conflict in the region. That is not the way that region calms down, or that is not good for the world.
Are you concerned that schemes like that don't make an adequate distinction between civilians and combatants?
Well, again, I don't know the detail of it, and I'm not prepared to comment on just speculation around that.
Joe. A couple of quick topics. Firstly, Nicola, back on ferries quickly. In terms of what happened with Blue Bridge last week, do we currently have a reliable service between our two islands?
Well, what we want to see is that the service is reliable and resilient into the future, and that is why we appointed the Ministerial Advisory Group to provide us recommendations about how we can ensure that. And I think all of us worry when we see incidents like the one we did last week, and we want to make sure that there is enough capacity across ferries on the strait that we can withstand those sorts of events. We also want to see safe passage, and that's ultimately a question for Maritime New Zealand, but it's critically important.
A random member of the public asked you today, do we have a reliable service that you can get from point A on the North Island to point B on the South Island? How would you answer that?
Well, I'd say that most of the time there are ferry crossings that are reliably going each day, and Kiwi Rail would give you data to back that up, as would Bluebridge. But I am interested in taking the steps we can as a government to ensure those services are reliable and resilient into the future.
Just one last one on Ruapehu. So the Ruapehu Mayor, Wes Curtin, he's urging the government to set up a task force. So the DOC's come out and said they're not proceeding with this planned expression of interest process to save Chateau Tongariro Hotel. Are you aware of this, and are you willing to take any of the steps that Wes Curtin's asking for, because he believes that there are potential developers and investors out there that are interested?
Well, look, I know that that's a matter that the Minister of Conservation has had under consideration. Obviously, we want to see the Ruapehu district continue to have the tourism attractions that create jobs and incomes for locals, and we have been looking for ways to deliver that. There has obviously been a struggle over the past couple of years finding an operator for the Whakapapa ski field, and I know that the Minister has been considering a range of options about how the different attractions might be bundled together and what the options would look like, but I encourage you to go to him for the latest updates on where that's at.
End of the line, so DOC saying they're pulling the expressions of interest, you're saying that's not the end of the line, that the government will...
Well, we were very clear at the last round that this would be the last bit of government support and help that we would be extending. In fairness, there are ongoing conversations that, in fairness, the Minister of Conservation, Tama Pataka, can answer for you.
Okay. Australia's making moves toward introducing age verification trials for social media. Are you looking at what they're doing in that space as to whether you could adopt similar measures?
Yeah, look, it's not currently on our work plan for the reasons I just outlined before, that we've got other higher level priorities for right now. It's something that I do have sympathy for, but in fairness to the Minister for Workplace Relations, she's got quite a lot on her plate and her agenda. And having said that, you know, the thing is, I'd say the mobile phone ban is a good case in point where actually that has worked really well, I think, to build, you know, to pull down cyberbullying, to get our kids interacting with each other physically more, all of the good things that you're seeing, you know, in New Zealand, but now you're seeing other places around the world pick up that policy as well. So, look, at this point, not on the agenda, but certainly something I've got sympathy for.
To clarify on the ferry, so have ministers got all of the advice that you need, or are you still waiting on further advice? Have you got everything you need?
We're continuing to take advice.
Is New Zealand First holding this up?
We're continuing to take advice as ministers. Ministers are all engaged in the process across the three parties in the coalition, and we are testing proposals, asking questions, making sure that the decisions we make are based on good information and good advice.
Yes. We're all engaged, but are ministers all aligned? Are the coalition parties aligned?
As I say, we haven't had a final cabinet discussion, so it would be premature to make any assessment of that.
Publicly, you believe rail enablement is not really a bottom line for the ferries, but Winston Peters has said publicly that he thinks rail enablement really is quite essential for this decision. It's quite clear that public non-alignment.
I think it would be wrong to characterise him as having expressed that as a bottom line.
Okay, sorry, Jamie.
Can I just ask you about the frickin' targets, as you mentioned last week? You've previously been a big proponent of targets, talked about it a lot. What prompted that comment last week?
Look, I mean, the question was asked by Benedict, who was asking questions around, you know, the data cleansing that's going on around the gangs as to whether was something that we had requested. What I was trying to say is, look, and I've said this to you guys when I've talked about the targets very openly, is the targets are really important, right? They're the best proxy that we've got towards delivering outcomes. But what's important and why we monitor the progress quarterly and why I'm releasing them quarterly is very simply because what's more powerful to me is the conversations that are going on in the different committees that we're running about what are you doing around, you know, making faster progress towards that target. So it was just more the point that, look, the time you want to discuss, the cleansing of gang list data, which the police, we want them to have the most accurate, best quality quality data. We're not gaming the system, which was what the implication of the question was about. We're actually there to get things done and to make sure we lower crime. And so if that enables us to go after gangs in a much more precise way because we've got better quality data, well, so be it.
That's our job, is to ask those questions.
Feel free, and my job's to give you an answer.
Do you have a problem being challenged?
No, not at all. But equally, if you're going to ask a question, I'm entitled to my view to give you an answer too, and I'll do that.
The pilot, Philip Mehrtens, do you have any more detail about what made the difference in getting them released on Saturday? I mean, last week there was a terms put forward by the Papua group, and it didn't occur in that manner. Do you know what made the difference there?
Look, there's been a range of conversations. I don't want to go into too much detail about that. We might have more to say about it later, and I'll let the Foreign Minister talk to it more precisely. But I spoke to President Widodo about it several times, more recently as well. We've had full court engagement with the Indonesian authorities. We've wanted to make sure that his safety is paramount at all times through the last 19 months. And I just think there's been a range of people who have all contributed to actually unlocking his release and getting to the situation that we've got to now. No, and I reject, and I thought that was pretty disingenuous questions this morning suggesting that we did. That's not New Zealand policy.
No, the allegation wasn't about the New Zealand government, it was about a local politician.
Yeah, again, I just say to you, all I can tell you is that there's been a concerted effort from a range of people in the Indonesian system, the New Zealand system, in civil society, as I said before, and the good news is that he's out and free, and in fairness, he needs to be able to spend time with his family who he hasn't seen for 19 months.
Just to be clear, though, you're not aware of any payment.
Sorry?
You're not aware of any payment that
Correct.
by local politicians.
The hostage takers say that this could happen again, it's a conflict zone, etc. I mean, does the government need to do anything, issue any sort of advisory?
Well, we do. We say to people, do not go to Papua. So we've been saying that for a long time, and that's what we expect people to do.
What needs to be done to ensure that doesn't occur?
No, I think when you issue advice and people are adults and have free will, they take that advice and they should weigh that up and consider it very closely and very carefully.
Since you've both given this edict to the public service that they need to be at work Monday to Friday, will you both be publicly available Monday to Friday, including media interviews?
Well, the great thing is, Jenna,
I already am, Jenna.
Yeah. We're available 24/7.
Mondays I'm on Radio New Zealand and News Talk ZB. Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays they do a house run. Most Fridays someone puts an inquiry to me.
Do you know in the last 14 days I think I've been available except for 3 days to different media.
Podcast this week?
Well, it depends on. We have to weigh up a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of high-ranking podcasts out there, and I'm not sure where Tova's one stands, to be honest. But I'll give it some thought. All right, thanks, team.